we're Leahy Consulting, and we've been in business for over 40 years, 30 specifically with Macola. So as Mike likes to say, we've been in business for forever. We consider ourselves manufacturing, distribution, ERP software specialists, and we are 17 employees based out of Cincinnati. A number of us might be out of state as well. One of the things that we pride ourselves in doing is that we develop software that makes your standard Macola easier to use. A little bit about some other products that we offer as well. A few of the bullets on here. Many of you may have known kind of our flagship is our Pulse dashboard and reporting software. We also have an archive, a lockbox software, and I'll take a second to discuss the Pulse e-commerce software. A lot of times during these demos, customers talk about how they give and receive orders. For the demo tomorrow, where we're talking about customer orders, one of the ways that customers often will give you orders sometimes is via email in a bulk type setting, let's say in a spreadsheet, or to where you're downloading it off of a website or an EDI portal, let's say. E-commerce does a number of things, including those to be able to import those orders automatically into Macola. So a lot of times when we're demoing this software, we'll also discuss e-commerce as well. And that's for sending and receiving information directly out of Macola in a one-time mapping type of session. We've got a number of other utilities. There's 14 in total that allow import and export of data into and out of Macola with full error checking and validation. Very nice utility that is great for being able to do mass updates or additions to your software. As we're discussing today, our vendor and customer portal, specifically the vendor today, and the journey of never-ending enhancements. So we are always listening to you. What you're seeing today or any of our other software is typically come directly from customers that have requested something, and it's turned into the software that it is today as we continue to add on to it. So for today's demo, what is the Pulse Purchase Order Management software? This is software to collaborate in real time with vendors using notes, documents, emails, and reports. So this integrates directly with your Macola software that you can use right away. There's no mapping that needs to be done. There's no upload and download. It's doing a direct read from your Macola database. This allows it to be real time. There's advantages then of it being web-based as far as who can access, where they're located in our country, out of our country. As long as you've got authority with full security on it, you have access. This eliminates endless emails, voicemails with vendors, and this gets your vendors working for you. Who do we target for this type of software? Well, we have companies with high volume strategic vendors, ones that you've built trust with and you have a lot of back and forth with, a lot of collaboration, and you would like to make sure everybody knows what the status is of every order and that we know whether our vendors have received the order or not, whether we've received their updates to the orders then as well. Companies that need improved vendor on-time deliveries, included within communication. And one of the quotes that we have is, recall the time you called a vendor to confirm an important delivery and found they never received your purchase order. So there's always that heart drop that I feel like we get when we call and we say, hey, what's the status of this order? You get a little bit of a silence on the other end, and they say to you, what order in that case? And to which you say, okay, let's start over again. So part of what we'll be showing you today, you should be able to see my screen now, is being able to avoid those types of questions, that everybody always is looking at the latest and greatest, and everybody knows the current status between you, anyone else in your company, and your particular strategic vendors that you would like to work with. So I'm going to start by showing you a little bit of a layout of the screen. Right now, I am signed into our Leahy Consulting website. This is using a user ID and password. It's on our IIS server. It's on the same server as Macola, and all of the data that we're seeing on the screen, and as we drill in, will either be coming directly from our Macola test database, or it's extra fields that we've made available to you that aren't in Macola. Okay. Going across from left to right, we've got these boxes here, what we'll refer to as hubs. These are fully configurable and where I can save and make these a dashboard on my screen. I'm signed in as one of the internal buyers with our company. And so therefore, I'm able to see more than, let's say, if I allowed a vendor to sign in, which I might show you as the demo goes on. With inside the hubs, notice that I've got two different titles here. I've got interactions that has to do with all the buyers. So maybe your company has more than one buyer. And then there's a hub that's specific for me. These are my action items that I need to do something with. I could make a copy of this hub and have one that says Bill's actions items. Let's say Bill is another buyer within our company. And let's say Bill goes on vacation. I could make a copy of this, put this down below here, and instead of seeing possibly 12 items that are waiting on supplier, I might see 3 for Bill that I know I'm going to cover for Bill for a week, and I'd like to see Bill's items that are waiting for me or him to respond to, right? Let's drill down into some of these as we go down through the list from the top to the bottom here. I just want to show you a couple first. Waiting on supplier. These are items for purchase orders that have been printed within Macola or through our purchase order manager and have an interaction that is waiting for the supplier to take on it. Same idea for then purchase orders that are waiting on us, in this example here, waiting on me to respond to in some way. Okay, and then we'll come down through and I'll show you some of these other examples as we go through the demo. Well, let's first go into the waiting on suppliers. If you noticed on there, it had a number of 12 that were waiting for a response from a supplier. Showing you a little bit of the layout of the screen first, I've got predefined columns. And if you're familiar with our Pulse dashboard software, it's a little bit the same idea to where I can just drag and drop any of my columns to rearrange it. If I were to leave and come back, it's going to go back to my default. Or I can save any of my changes at any time, make a new link, or update this link that I'm coming in with. Let's say I wanted to add a new column onto my screen. I'm just going to click the 3 dots on the right of any of these columns. And then I'll come down to the column feature, and I've got available to me all of the fields available to search on within this particular screen. Notice here in the second column, this is the actual Macola name. But similar to our Pulse dashboard software, we try to not make you have to know all of that detail. So we went through and we renamed all the fields into a business English. Okay. So let's say I wanted to possibly look for the order weight. Any phrase that has weight in it would show up here just by typing in the first few letters. Helps me narrow it down, and I just click on my checkbox for is visible to see it on the screen. Notice order weight was added here. I could move it over to the right, and then I could save this search if I'd like to keep that in as my default for the future. Okay, showing you a few other columns before I drill down in. Here's some more. We've got our order number, our vendor name, purchase orders type, who the buyer was, so I can see mine or I could possibly see others. My order date and status. And once we get into a little bit more detail, I'll show you how this last action party and last action will work. Let's go over to the vendor name, and I'm going to start typing in a partial vendor name. This narrows it down to the particular vendor that I would like to work with. I have 2 purchase orders that are waiting on an action from the supplier. So let's drill down into 24-00. Right now, this brings up the actual purchase order in Macola with the current status and all the current and latest information that's available on this. So one of the advantage of this is if I'm looking at this, another buyer or the vendor, they're looking at the latest information for this purchase order. So there's not a concern anymore of when I email a purchase order out or physically fax it out, whatever the way that you handle it within your company, I don't have to worry, do I have the latest copy here? Do they have the latest copy? You're always looking at the latest update on the screen. Across the top, I've got all my header information for the purchase order that we would see if I was looking at this directly in Macola as well. Coming down to the bottom then, I've got all my line informations here, and I've got 4 lines that I'm working with. Notice some of the things that we've added onto the screen. Again, I've got my default fields that I'm able to see here. I could change and remove those like on all the other screens that I just was showing you. Down under the note area, I can add in a note now per line item. And these are unlimited notes that are available. So if I say new note number 2 on here, notice over on the right, when I go to click save, there's a notify checkbox checked. Okay. So as I save this, I have configured up in my system who is going to get notified. So I will have my primary contact, typically at the vendor, be notified that there is which typically with a hot link says there's a new update for vendor purchase order 24-00. Please click here. They click the hot link, they'd be able to come in and view the note. Okay, unlimited on there, and I'm able to see this. If the vendor signs in, if the vendor puts a new note in, I would get that email as well. You configure what goes out on the email, what the information is, and whom it would go to when those notes are updated. All right. Coming up to the top, I'm going to show you my ability to click edit. If I have authority, I can come down and edit this purchase order. Let's go down to the promise date that I see here, and notice for my gloves item here, I've got a promise date of 7/6/22. And let's say I would like to change that to something later this month, and so I'll change it to the 31st. I'm going to come down below and I'm going to click save. And once I click save, this is going to update my ongoing running history of all the changes that have been made on this purchase order. Obviously, this one has quite a few because it's our demo database, and it's our demo item that we show quite a bit. So here are all the changes that I particularly made. If the vendor or somebody else had made the change, I would have a different avatar. I would have who that was, and I would have what the date and the time took place for this. So notice that it was today at 2:44 Eastern time. I can open that up and see, well, what exactly did change. Previously, I had July 6, 2022, and now I've got a new promise date of July 31st, 2022. What this will do also will notify the vendor that there's been a change. When they come in, there's going to be a list of items for the, as we mentioned there, items for the supplier to view, and they're going to come in and they're going to have an option to approve this new potential promise date here. And if they were to make the change to the promise date, I would have an approve button then at the top, which I'll show you in a moment. Okay. Coming back out here, I'll be able to see, well, there's items that are waiting on me to respond to. So I'll come into this one. So we previously were looking at waiting on supplier, and now we've got one for order number 40-00 from Shimani Corporation. I'll click on that, and I'll be able to see they made a change, and I'll be able to see what the new change was. Okay, so notice they put in a note, new promise date entered today. I can click acknowledge on that to show that I've read the note. I could add a new note on here saying received or agreed, whatever I choose to in the collaboration. And I can come down here and I can see that earlier today, that vendor made a change on there. Notice now I have this approve button, and I could go down and double check that it's what I'm expecting on there is the new promise date of April 30th, 2024. And I can approve that, and this would let the vendor know that it's approved, and my list of items that I need to respond to will go from 1 to 0 in this case. So I would be able to see, and the vendor would be able to see whether there's any items that need to be responded to. All right. Notice it's the same idea for notes. So if you remember that there was a note there for me to acknowledge, I could come out here and just in general say, well, what items and what notes have been updated that I need to review. So again, this is avoiding the phone calls, the emails, all the collaboration goes here, and I'm able to see what notes have my suppliers not read, and they can see what notes have I not read yet. So maybe I'm on vacation, maybe they're on vacation, and they're able to see this, okay? So let's go into 41-00, and be able to come down and see if there's any notes that were on here. And once I've clicked on that, it's going to show that I have viewed this particular note. Okay. Coming back out to my hub, I'd be able to see this list, and as I acknowledge it, that number would go down from 2 to 0 in this case. All right. Now we'll show you a little bit about creating a purchase order. Given the authority, I can create a purchase order just like I do in Macola right from this screen. Whomever you give authority to can enter this new purchase order in. So right away, it's going to bring up my screen asking what the vendor is that I would like. This is coming directly from the Macola database as well. If I want to change that, I can just click on my magnifying glass here to go out and find a new vendor. It's going to bring in their address information, defaulting with the same rules as in Macola, and the ship to information. If I have authority, I could type in a free form change on here, or I could prompt out to my address list and my ship to list to be able to modify that. Same with my other header information here below. And then let's say I want to add in some new items to actually start building on this database here. So maybe I'll see if I have tires in this example. And that's part of my description that I've got, or if I know the item number directly, I could type that in right there. It brings it brings in whatever the default price is, if I have that showing on the screen, or the cost. I can change how that views, and I can update my quantity to 4 then as well, if that's available. Coming up here, it's already ready to put in line number 2. And so let's say I want to enter in possibly some brackets. So I just start typing that phrase, and I then could put in whatever the new number is for the number of brackets and make that 10. And if I'm ready to create this purchase order, I just come down and I'll click Save, and this creates this in our Macola system. All right. Mike, any questions so far?
Yes, there have been. A few things here. Somebody was complimenting us on how fast, how the nice speed of this portal. I think they were expecting maybe that it wouldn't have very good response time. So thank you for the compliment there. Then we had 2 other questions. One had to do with when you buy the software, how many vendors do you get? In other words, is this well, I guess the answer basically is that the initial number of vendors you get is 25. You can have an unlimited number, but what we find is that customers or our customer are not using this with all their vendors. They're just using this with their key vendors. So everybody can start off with 25 and go up from there. Then the other question was, well, what is the price of this? And the short answer, it's all depending on the number of users, the number of internal users, and the number of vendors. But in a nutshell, the software is $8,000, around a little over $8,100, and that's on a perpetual license. And then on a monthly subscription, it's $750. So basically, it's $8,100 for a perpetual license, and then on a monthly subscription, it would be $750. So those are the questions that have come in so far, and I think this is going well. So back to you, Bart.
Okay, thanks, Mike. What I've done now is I've logged out, and I want to be able to show you that I have an option. So right here from the screen, this is what's needed for your users or your vendors to be able to log in. If they don't have their unique user ID and password, they cannot log in. And once we give this to them, we control not only what items they're able to see on the screen, what they can do, and how much they see of this. So notice now I have actually logged in. This says test person here, but this is one of the vendors that I was working with from the Shimani Corporation that I mentioned to you earlier. Notice instead of having about 4 or 5 hubs on the screen, I just have one. I've narrowed that information down because I'm narrowing down what the vendor can do within our system. And then I've also narrowed down the data on here. So now I'm only seeing information relevant to that particular vendor. So in this case, there is one item that is waiting on supplier for this particular vendor to have to work with. And when I drill into this, it's just going to pull up the one that we've discussed before, and that's 33-00. If I come into this, notice that it's showing that there was a change, and this, as the vendor now, I have the ability to approve this, or I could come down here and I could make another change or add another note either on that line item or here. And one other thing that I'll show you as well is both sides can attach unlimited documents to this purchase order. So one thing that we've got, if you want to actually have a still want to print out a historic, normal way of that we printed out purchase orders in the past, physically printing them out, or as a PDF, you can do that. Let's say somebody is signing that and you want to keep a copy of that signed PDF. You can attach it on here. You can attach any other spreadsheet, work instructions, delivery instructions, all can be added. Any photos as well. I've just got to click add document, and any document that I have available can be added. I then also have the option to have as many different revisions of that. I could leave them all out there, or I could delete the previous revisions. And again, what's nice is it's going to show me when they were added, who they were added by. So again, the point is I'm always looking at the latest copy of whatever that document is. If there's a spreadsheet, I don't have to worry about that was last week's spreadsheet, last week's order as an example on here. So again, unlimited, they can be added by whoever you give authority to, the user or the vendor in this case. Okay. Me as the vendor, again, I could come in and I could approve this change. I'm going to go back out to the menu, and if you remember, I had one item that was waiting on me. That's gone down to 0. Okay. Let's say you're wanting to bug your vendor. Hey, we've got quite a few purchase orders out to you that are missing some promise dates. So we made a shortcut just specifically to be able to go out and allow somebody to put in the promise date. You could be on the phone with your vendor as you're filling it in. You could have them fill it in, etc. Okay. Come back out here just to show you a couple other items. Notes for supplier to read, similar to what we showed you before. Purchase orders that are late then as well. And I would not have normally as a vendor this ability to unlock this screen. Unlock is what allows me to add extra items onto the screen as well. I'm going to sign back out and come back in as Carrie, again, the internal buyer. And I'll show you just a couple other items up at the top of the screen here. I showed you already that I could enter in a new purchase order, but we've given you the ability to query a number of the items or a number of the database records and files within the system. So if I want to search through my orders, my history, my purchase order shipped to address list, I can. If I want to go and query my vendors right from here, I can do that and these specific items with that. All right. Same with my inventory. Right here, I want to know before I enter in a new purchase order, what items do we already have on hand? I can see that as well. Or if I want to just go through the notes, I sent the note, did I send it to the right person? Did I finish that note? I can just query the database here for all the notes. Notice here on this drop-down list, this is showing that this will work with any of the Macola versions. So Progression, ES, or Macola 10. Any of them, the screens will look exactly the same, will work for all your versions that you have, if you ever were to update or change or be concerned on which version you have. Right. Over on the right, just want to show you some other ideas that we wanted to list here. So we have a box here where we configured it and where we said, hey, we'd like to see purchase orders that are 1 to 2 weeks out, ones that are coming this week for planning purposes, and then all that are let's say less than 60 days out. Notice again, these are all just wish list or preferred items that I want to be able to see in my dashboard by default, items that are awaiting inspection, let's say brackets or bolts that are on order, and late purchase orders that will make our manufacturing orders late. Okay, so we have a list then based on that we've been able to configure. One last thing I'll say on this before asking Mike if he has any more questions is I mentioned earlier that this is all looking directly at your Macola database, or for example, the added documents, the added note fields, the unlimited ability with that, that's coming directly from here. We also have a developer that helped develop this on staff and other developers. So if you have a third-party set of tables, just maybe one small table or a third-party app, and you want us to read that and somehow have it available or connected in with any of these screens, we can do that as well. So if you, for whatever reason, you have some other database with any of your vendor interactions or any other information that you've got for your orders, they're available here too. Okay. Any other questions, Mike? I think I've shown most of this, unless there's something specific anyone wants to point out.
This is a great job. No, a question just came in a minute ago, and I responded back to everybody. Are there any restrictions on the types of documents or the number of documents that can be included?
Yeah,
and I said no. Any kind of a Microsoft Office document, which would be like a Word document or Excel, a PDF document, a JPEG, any kind of AutoCAD drawing. I remember a customer that had a blueprint. They PDF their AutoCAD drawings, and they sent that with every purchase order. That way, the vendor always had the correct drawing, the correct specs, and they didn't ship the wrong one. So it's very, 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 very flexible.
Yes, and they will stay out here as long as you want them to stay out. So until you delete them, they're permanently attached to the purchase order. So you don't have to worry about having it in another database somewhere else. Thank you, Mike. Okay. Any other questions? All right. I think I've been able to show you a lot of this. I think everyone will get the concept. If anybody wants to see more of this, feel free to reach out to us so we can show you a similar demo tailored directly to you as well.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.